I'd been living in this building for 3 months when she finally spoke to me. Not just a polite nod in the hallway, not just the soft click of her door closing as I passed. A real sentence. "I'm too old for games," she said from across the shared balcony, arms folded on the railing like she was holding herself in place. Her voice had a dry warmth to it, like tea left to steep a little too long. I didn't know what she meant at first. I was just standing there with a mug of instant coffee, watching the rain collect in the potted plants between our doors. I managed a weak smile, and she almost smiled back before looking down at her bare feet. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it felt charged, like static before a storm. Her name was Claire. Mid-40s, maybe late. Dark blonde hair with a few silver strands that caught the hallway light. She always wore quiet clothes, loose sweaters, soft colors, but her eyes had a way of cutting through. I'd seen her carrying groceries, holding a phone to her ear, never laughing loud enough for anyone to hear. I'm 23, still figuring out what a real life even looks like. Most nights I'm either working late or scrolling until I fall asleep. The balcony was just a place to breathe. But that night, with her leaning there, saying she was too old for games, it felt like she was opening a door no one else had even knocked on. "You ever play cards?" I asked, because I couldn't think of anything else. She gave me a look, not annoyed, more like curious at my stupidity. "I don't play," she said, but her fingers were tracing the rim of her coffee mug like she might shuffle a deck any second. The rain softened. A taxi hissed past on the street below. Inside her apartment a lamp glowed low, throwing gold onto the edge of her cheek. I noticed she had no ring on her finger. I noticed I was noticing. "You're new here," she said finally. "I've seen you bringing boxes in." "Yeah. Cheaper rent than anywhere else." Her eyes flicked over me once, quick. "And no one to warn you about the neighbors." I laughed quietly. She almost did too. Something in her posture shifted, shoulders relaxing a fraction, weight leaning a little toward me. The smell of rain mixed with something floral from her doorway. I didn't want to push. Everything about her said careful. But I also didn't want to step back. "You're out here every night," she said. "You watching something?" "Just the city," I said, trying to feel less alone. Her hand paused on the mug. She looked at me a beat longer than felt normal. "It doesn't always work," she murmured. That was it, not flirtation, not an invitation, just a thin line thrown across the gap between us. And I caught it. I nodded, couldn't stop my eyes from staying on hers. Somewhere below, a door slammed. A car alarm chirped once and went silent. She shifted her weight again, as if she was about to retreat inside, and then, almost absent-mindedly, she touched the balcony rail near my hand. Not on my hand, just close enough that the heat from her skin crossed the metal. I swallowed. "Maybe we could talk sometime," I said, my voice low. Her lips parted slightly. She didn't answer right away. Then, from inside her apartment, a phone buzzed loud enough for both of us to hear. She glanced over her shoulder, hesitated, and looked back at me. The buzz came again. She didn't move. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could, her doorbell rang. The doorbell kept ringing, muffled through her apartment. Claire's eyes flicked between the hallway and me. Then she muttered something like, "Always at the wrong time," set her mug down and slipped inside. I stayed on the balcony, rain dripping from the railing, trying not to imagine who might be at her door. Through the thin wall I heard a man's voice, low and even. Not angry. Familiar. A moment later the door closed, footsteps, then silence. When she came back out, she had a faint crease between her brows and a jacket draped over her arm. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Fine." She hesitated, then added, "My ex. He still thinks this is his building sometimes." She gave a quick, humorless laugh. "Old habits." I nodded, not sure what to say. The jacket smelled faintly of cigarette smoke when she hung it on the back of a chair. She noticed me noticing and shrugged. We were together a long time. Didn't end well. I wanted to ask more, but her posture said don't. Instead, I told her about myself, how I dropped out of a master's program, how I was picking up shifts at a warehouse while figuring things out. My parents think I'm wasting time, I said, eyes on the wet street. Maybe they're right. She was quiet for a while, fingers tracing the mug she hadn't touched. My son's your age, she said finally. He lives 2 states away. We don't talk much. He doesn't like my choices. That settled between us like a secret neither of us should have shared. The rain picked up again, pinpricks on metal. She turned slightly toward me, eyes softer now. You remind me of him, she said, then added, almost under her breath, but not really. I laughed once, nervous. That's a weird thing to say. I know. She looked away. It's a weird night. I felt something twist inside me, a pull that wasn't just attraction but something heavier, like recognizing a piece of someone you weren't supposed to touch. I told myself it was just the age gap, just curiosity. But when she brushed a damp strand of hair from her cheek and her sleeve slid back to reveal a thin scar on her wrist, I wanted to reach across and cover it with my hand. I didn't. Instead, I asked, "Do you miss him?" Your son. Her eyes flicked up to mine. Every day, she whispered. We sat there like that, rain filling the silence. Her apartment light spilled across the balcony and caught the silver in her hair. She shifted closer, enough that her knee almost brushed mine. She didn't pull away. Neither did I. Some nights, she said softly, it's hard not to play with fire. Before I could answer, her hand landed on the railing next to mine, warm and trembling. Not a grab, not a gesture, just there, waiting. The next evening the rain had stopped, but everything smelled like it. I told myself I wouldn't linger on the balcony. I told myself I'd keep my door closed. Instead, I found myself leaning on the railing, waiting. Her curtains shifted before she stepped out. She wasn't holding a mug this time. Just her phone, screen glowing against her palm. She looked tired. Beautiful, but tired. I shouldn't be out here, she murmured, not quite to me. Me neither, I said. We both laughed softly, and it died in the air between us. Her phone buzzed. She silenced it without looking. Your ex again? I asked. She shook her head. My son. He's visiting this weekend. He thinks I'm lonely. He wants to check on me. That landed like a stone in my stomach. Suddenly all the invisible lines between us glowed red. She had a son my age. She had a history, a life that could swallow mine if I wasn't careful. I should probably. She started, stepping back toward her door. Don't, I said before thinking. Stay a minute. Her eyes held mine. We both stood there, not moving. My hand gripped the railing hard enough to hurt. I don't know what we're doing, she whispered. Neither do I. A voice cut up from the street below. Claire! We both jerked our heads over the railing. A man in a leather jacket, the ex, I guessed, stood by a car, looking up. She tensed. Go inside. She hissed at me, low but urgent. I live here too, I said. She moved closer, her shoulder brushing mine, as if proximity might hide me. Please, she whispered. He doesn't need to see you. I slipped back into my apartment, heart thudding. Through the crack in my curtain I saw her lean over the railing, exchange a few curt words, then disappear inside. A door closed. Silence. I sat on my couch, palms damp, staring at the wall. Why did I care so much? Why did it feel like I'd just been caught? A soft knock at my door. When I opened it, she was there, eyes bright with a mix of anger and something else. Sorry, she said. I didn't mean to drag you into that. It's fine, I said, stepping aside. She didn't come in. We stood in the doorway, too close. You should keep your distance, she said quietly. For your sake. I can't, I heard myself answer. Her breath caught. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then, as if gravity tilted, she reached up and touched my jaw with the back of her fingers, so light it might have been an accident. I almost leaned in. She almost did too. Then her phone buzzed again, loud in the hallway. She snatched her hand back. I have to go, she whispered, eyes wide, and turned down the hall. I stayed frozen in the doorway, my skin still burning where her fingers had been. I spent the next 2 days pretending to be busy. Shifts at the warehouse, late night runs, long showers. Anything to keep from stepping onto the balcony. But every time I passed my window, my eyes slid to her side of the building. Lights on. Curtains drawn. Sometimes a silhouette moving. Saturday evening I came back sweaty from a run and saw a car parked crooked out front. A young guy climbed out with a duffel bag, tall, dark hair, my age. Her son. He walked past me in the stairwell without a glance, phone pressed to his ear. I shut my door and leaned against it, chest tight. I told myself it was normal, she had a family. I told myself to stop thinking about her. But later, through the thin wall, I heard their voices, hers low and careful, his sharper, like a blade drawn across a table. You can't keep doing this, he said once, loud enough for me to catch. Then quieter, words I couldn't make out. The sound of it made my stomach twist. I imagined him accusing, imagined her defending herself. Imagined myself in the picture even though I wasn't. After midnight the apartment next door went quiet. I sat on my couch, restless, until a soft knock came at my door. When I opened it, Claire stood there in a cardigan, hair damp from a shower. Her eyes were glassy, cheeks flushed as if she'd been crying. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped aside. She walked straight to the window and looked out at the dark street. He left early, she said. We fought. I didn't know what to do with my hands. I'm sorry. She turned. He thinks I'm reckless. That I don't know what I'm doing. A tremor in her voice. Maybe he's right. You're not reckless, I said. Her eyes found mine, searching for something. Then what am I? The question hung there. I took a step toward her. She didn't move back. The streetlight cut across her face, catching the silver in her hair. Up close, she looked both older and younger than she did from the balcony, softer, fragile in a way she never let show. I keep telling myself to stop, she whispered. But when I see you... She broke off, pressing a hand to her mouth. Her shoulders shook once. I reached out, touched her wrist lightly, meaning only to steady her. She didn't pull away. Instead, she looked at my hand on her skin and let out a small, broken laugh. This is wrong, she said, but her fingers turned under mine and caught hold. My heart slammed against my ribs. Every line I'd drawn in my head dissolved. I stepped closer until we were breathing the same air. She tilted her face up just enough that I could feel the warmth of her breath. For a moment nothing existed but the distance between our mouths, a hair's breadth, a heartbeat, and then, she didn't kiss me. Instead she pulled back, eyes darting to the door like she'd heard something. I followed her gaze. My apartment was silent. Then my phone buzzed on the table, a new voicemail from an unknown number. She swallowed hard. You should listen to that, she said. I frowned. Why? Her hands were shaking now. Because it's about me. I pressed play on speaker. A man's voice filled the room, low and even, the same voice I'd heard on the balcony days before. You don't know who she is, he said. You think she's single, but she's still married to me. She lies. She always lies. Stay away. Then a click. My stomach dropped. What? It's not what it sounds like, she said quickly. We're separated. He won't sign the papers. He's angry I moved out. He's watching me. You didn't tell me, I said, softer than I meant to. You let me. I didn't plan any of this. Her voice cracked. You're too young. You shouldn't even be. She stopped, biting her lip hard enough to leave a mark. I stepped back, hands on my head. The apartment felt smaller, walls leaning in. Part of me wanted to yell. Another part wanted to pull her against me and hide her from everything. Outside, a car door slammed. She flinched. He followed me here, she whispered. He's downstairs. Call the police, I said. They won't do anything, she murmured. He hasn't touched me. He just shows up, leaves notes, calls people I know. He's trying to scare me into coming back. My phone buzzed again, a text this time. I see you. I know what you're doing. No name, just the message. I showed her the screen. Her face went pale. He's done this before, she said. Every time I try to build a life, he poisons it. Something hot rose in my chest, not just fear but a strange, protective anger. Then why let him win? I asked. She met my eyes, tears brimming. Because every time I reach for someone, they pull away once they know the truth. I stepped closer until we were almost touching. I'm still here, I said. Even after that. Her breath hitched. You shouldn't be. Maybe not, I said. But I am. We stood there in the dim apartment, her fingers clutching the hem of her sweater like a lifeline. Down on the street a car engine revved, then cut off. Silence pressed in. She looked at me as if trying to memorize my face. If you stay, she whispered, everything changes. You'll be a target too. I didn't move. Neither did she. For a long moment the only sound was our breathing and the faint tick of my kitchen clock. Then a shadow crossed my window, someone walking past, stopping. The shadow at my window didn't move. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Then I heard the faint click of a lighter, a flare of orange, and the shape drifted back toward the street. Her ex waiting. Claire's hand brushed mine. He's not leaving, she said quietly. He wants you to be scared. I am, I admitted. Then go, she whispered. Please. I turned to her. And leave you here with him? No. You don't understand. She stopped herself, pressed both palms to her face. I've done this before. I've ruined people's lives by letting them get close. You didn't ruin mine, I said. I walked into this. She dropped her hands. Her eyes were red but steady now. You're young. You can still leave before it's too late. And you? I asked. A bitter smile. I stopped leaving a long time ago. For a heartbeat we just stared at each other, everything unsaid sitting between us. Then, from the street, a car door slammed again, louder. Her whole body tensed. Something snapped inside me. Not bravado, not impulse, just a decision. I crossed the small space and took her hands, pulling them down from her face. I'm not going anywhere, I said. Not tonight. Her breath shuddered out of her. You don't know what that means. I do. My voice was low but steady. It means I'm choosing you. At least for right now. She stared at me as if searching for an escape route. None came. Why? She whispered. Because every night I've stood on that balcony hoping you'd talk to me. Because I'm tired of pretending I don't want this. My throat tightened. Because you're not a game to me. Her eyes flickered, surprise, fear, something softer. She took one step forward, then another until we were almost chest to chest. Say it again. She murmured. You're not a game. I said. You're the only thing that's felt real in months. For a moment neither of us moved. Then she reached up, fingers trembling, and rested her palm against the back of my neck. It wasn't a kiss. It was contact, raw and unhidden. The air between us seemed to collapse. Down below, the engine of the car roared to life. Tires squealed. A door slammed. Silence returned. We stayed like that, pressed together, listening to nothing. She drew back just enough to look up at me. "You don't know what comes next," she said. "I don't care," I whispered. Her forehead leaned against mine. We stayed there, breathing each other's air, a tiny fragile space where no one else existed. The clock ticked. Her hand stayed on my neck. Mine stayed on her waist. Neither of us said the word, but both of us knew what it was. And then the hallway light flicked on outside my door. The hallway light went off again a few minutes later. No knock. No footsteps. Just quiet. Claire let out a long, shaky breath and stepped back, rubbing her hands over her arms like she was cold. "He's gone," she said softly. "For now." I nodded, still feeling the ghost of her palm against my neck. "Then maybe we can finally talk." She moved to the couch and sat down, curling one leg under herself. I sat opposite her, not too close, but close enough that if either of us reached out we'd touch. The apartment smelled like rain and the faint perfume she always wore. "I don't do this," she said after a while. "I don't pull people into my mess. I'm already in it," I said. "By choice." She gave a small, sad smile. "You're still young. You'll wake up one day and regret this." "Maybe," I said. "But not tonight." We sat there in the hush of early morning. She told me more about her marriage, how she'd spent years holding everything together while he slowly chipped at her confidence. How moving out had been the first real decision she'd made for herself in a decade. How her son didn't understand any of it. And I told her about my own running, not just from grad school but from expectations, from a life that never felt like mine. How I'd been lonely long before I met her. By the time we both ran out of words, the sky outside had gone pale. She leaned back, head resting on the couch cushion, eyes half closed. "I don't know what happens next," she murmured. "I'm still married on paper. He's not going to stop. And you..." She opened her eyes, looked at me. "You deserve someone who isn't afraid." I reached over and took her hand. This time she didn't flinch. "I deserve someone real," I said. "Even if it's complicated." Her fingers tightened around mine. A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. We stayed like that, two people who had stepped across every invisible line and now had to figure out how to live there. No declarations. No promises. Just a quiet, stubborn choice. Outside, a bird called from a rooftop. She smiled faintly at the sound, then at me. "You'll be late for work." "I know," I said. She stood and brushed her hair back. "Coffee?" she asked. I smiled. "Yeah. Coffee." As she moved toward the kitchen, the light from the window caught the silver in her hair and made it glow. She looked tired but lighter, like someone who had finally told the truth. I sat back, watching her, unsure of everything except that I didn't want to leave. "Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?"